Right. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending where you're zooming in from today to join us for Troop HR's pop-up workshop on designing employee surveys to drive real change with Marie Hehlke, Senior People Enablement Manager from Leapsome. From those of you who are not familiar with Leapsome, they are an AI-powered people platform for HR excellence and high-performing teams. They automate, connect, and simplify all HR processes across the entire employee lifecycle, from onboarding and performance management to employee engagement and development. Before we get started, a little background on our guest speaker, Marie, who again is the Senior People Enablement Manager at Leapsome. She is the driving force behind Leapsome's enablement processes. Marie brings a unique perspective on performance reviews with a career that began in talent acquisition at Michael Page and Exporo and evolved into enablement at Leapsome. She has successfully built Leapsome's performance review processes from the ground up and optimized existing ones to boost efficiency and engagement. Before we pass things over, just a quick reminder, today's session is a pop-up session, which is technically 30 minutes. We may go slightly over, but just want to make sure everyone is aware of that. If you have any questions during the session, please enter them into chat. I will be assisting Marie and monitoring it. Hopefully we have some time to get to them at the end. If not, we will certainly be sure to circle back with answers in the Troop HR forum following the session recap. And so with that, it is a pleasure to welcome Marie and the team at Leapsome. Thank you so much for joining us here today.
Yeah, very warm welcome also from my end. Very nice to meet and see you all across the world. That's always very crazy to see so many people joining us for those sessions. So yeah, as Tracy just said, today we'll focus on surveys because next to performance reviews, I'm also responsible for that at Leapsome. So you can summarize, I'm just owning all enablement modules at Leapsome, so I'm the heavy user there. I'm at Leapsome since August 2022, so almost 3 years now, which is exciting. And yeah, so let's get started. And as I said, we want to really focus on action planning behind surveys. And how we will get there today is that we first talk a little bit about what do you do before setting up a survey, like, yeah, where you go with those great surveys start already before you send them out and what you can do to prepare for efficient action planning in the end. Then we talk a little bit about how to ask the right questions, how you can really enable your survey to get the right feedback that you need for action planning. And then also how you then do this good thing about action planning, like how do you do it? How do you follow up with all those results you've then collected? So without further ado, let's dive into it. But before we start, I just want to give a little overview of different types of surveys and what we'll focus on today. So I think one of the surveys we all know are the big ones, the engagement surveys, with like 20 to 40 questions, very much depending on your organization size. And a lot of companies run those 2 to 4 times a year and really want to get insights on the overall state of the company and track engagement and other things. And the main goal of those is normally to force retention and to improve retention. Additionally to that, you normally run pulse surveys, which you do, I often see them like 4 to 8 weeks, also depending a little bit on your company schedule and stuff like that, with very short questions. Or just a few questions. So the survey is normally quite short, where you can check the pulse, like are there any changes, also maybe based on events, on company events or whatever. And that's also normally a great opportunity to ask specific questions, but I will dive into that a little bit later. And then we at Leapsome also like to send kind of one-off surveys to dive deeper into certain topics. So as Tracy Ann just said, I also own the performance reviews, and I always run a retro survey after the performance reviews to get feedback. So this is also something you could consider. And I just wanted to give you this overview what we at Leapsome use. So those are our normal 3 survey types. And one rule of ours is also to not send 2 surveys a month because we don't want to make the team survey fatigue. So you can see just our schedule. Maybe this is helpful. It's also just based on how we run performance reviews. So yeah, might be interesting for one or two of you how we do this. But as I said, we want to really focus on how to do action planning. And let's talk a little bit on how you can do this already before your survey starts. So one thing you should have in mind is, oh no, back, a survey strategy. So really ask yourself the why, like why am I sending this survey? What do I want to achieve with that survey? And also connect the survey to your company strategy, but also to company strategy planning events. Because we're always talking about like, hey, we as a people team want to get a seat at the table. And like collecting this data from surveys is really something you can use with this table at this, with the seat at this famous table. And if you connect this then also to your quarter planning, OKR planning, however your company is scheduled, this can already be very helpful also strategy-wise for your survey. And also define ownership early, like who of the company is responsible to take action on which topics. Like, do you want to involve your senior leadership team, your frontline managers, your, yeah, however your company is designed and set up, that might make sense. And one key shift for this is what I recommend, also depending very much on which tools you use. But in a lot of tools, you can set up question categories. So you can say we have different question categories. Each category has 3 to 4 questions and focuses on a specific topic. And this can really help with aligning your survey with company strategy or also your people strategy. And you might now ask yourself, hey, what could this be? What is she really talking about? So a little insight also from us, like those are our question categories. And when I say you want to define ownership, those question categories also have kind of stakeholders, or let's say a certain target group. For example, I always like to look into this one because I'm a senior people enablement manager. So I really have to focus on the category career growth, training, and development, but also like, of course, all categories are equally important to us, but you might already get an overview. Okay, those are the questions aligned with my team strategy or something like that. And also our senior leadership team is always looking a lot into the scores of leadership communication and strategy, but also organizational culture or overall well-being. And our frontline managers really like the category of management and team dynamics, as we normally ask some questions specifically, yeah, about the team you're working in this category. And I think how they can really help you now with this action planning we want to talk a little bit about today is this stakeholder management. Like this was really a key shift or a key learning for me, because now really, yeah, we see, okay, the scores in this category are improving, and the senior leadership team, for example, can really focus on these questions and doesn't just have a long list of questions and don't know where to start, where to end, where do I have to focus on, which scores are improving, which not. And also for me or for people ops team, you also saw the recognition and benefits. They are taking care of that topic in our case. Yeah. And it also gives you a lot of overview and structure, also technically wise. It can help you a lot with filtering questions, with really creating good overviews. Yeah, and then you can really deep dive into the category. And this normally leads to a very meaningful action planning, is at least my learning. So really recommend when you think about your survey strategy, also think about, yeah, how you want to structure your questions aligned with your company and people strategy. Another thing which might be obvious is timing, but I still want to talk about it because this can also be very impactful for you and your survey planning. First thing, make sure your team has time. Like we just celebrated 4th of July, or a lot of you did, so that week might not have been the best week to send out a survey because a lot of people like to take off during that time. Or also busy periods like end of year closing, end of quarter closing are always times I would avoid to send out a survey to just reach a high participation rate so that you really get a lot of feedback. Ensure you have time to analyze. Been there, done that, made this mistake. I sent out a survey, it closed. I was off for 2 weeks and the team was very disappointed that no one really took care of the results immediately. So also make sure that your personal calendar, if you are owning the analytics, is free after the survey. have enough space between surveys. I think that's very important, and that depends a lot on the size of your team, of your organization. But it might not make sense to run, for example, an engagement survey every quarter, because you might not have enough time or enough capacity to really work on the feedback that the team gave you. And that can create a lot of frustration if the team gives the same feedback over and over again and no progress was made in between. So also think about that, like how big is my people team or my leadership team or whoever works on the results and the action plans, and how much time do we normally need to take action. For example, we send out the engagement survey twice a year. We come from 4 times a year, but we've also recognized that we don't have, that just creates frustration on all ends. And so we have lowered it to 2 times a year. Block time with key stakeholders in advance. So when I send out a survey, our leadership team has the blockers so when the surveys go out and when the survey closes already in their calendar. So they know, oh, then all the results are there, and I could, in our case, reply to comments or something like that. And they can also in between remind their teams like to participate and so on. So they all have it in their calendars. And also the workshops that we do after the results, if you want to do something like that, I recommend to block this already before you send out the survey. This can be really, really changing. Trust is also something I would start building before you even send out your first survey, your 20th survey. I don't know where you're at, but this trust into the survey is very crucial, especially when it comes to anonymity, because people might be afraid, like, hey, when I write something, my manager might know, and yeah, I don't want them to know because it's a very constructive feedback, or something like that. So really, yeah, be transparent to your team. What is your threshold? Who can see what? And so on. And also with saying that, think about visibility settings. If you use a tool like Leapsome, you can, for example, say, okay, no one sees the results until I say they should see it. That might make sense. It might not sound transparent, but it actually is, in my opinion, and I think it's the best way to create clarity, because it can happen that people answer in an emotional way to a question you ask in your survey. And then this comment is out there, and maybe, yeah, the team, or depending on your settings, the whole company can already see it and might go to the manager like, hey, I've read this comment. What do you think about it? And your manager is overwhelmed and doesn't know, oh, I haven't read it. I don't know what to say. So that's why we opted for a staggered visibility. Like the people team can always see everything while results come in. And as soon as the survey is closed, our senior leadership team gets access, and has time to already answer on comments or to get familiar with results and think about, oh, what could be questions my team leads have. So yeah, the department leaders are already prepared. And then our frontline managers, so team leads or however they are called in your organization, get access. And they can already ask the senior leaders like, hey, what do you think about those scores, about those comments? Like they have already engaged with it. And they can also already prepare for questions from the team. And then the whole company gets access to the results of their teams. And this really ensures like critical comments are maybe already moderated. The managers have engaged with the results and can prepare for follow-up questions and really have the full picture. Yeah, because we all also always talk about manager enablement, and I think it's not only about training, but it's also about, yeah, giving them the opportunity to really do the best. And as I said, it's normally not restricting transparency, because in the end, everyone can see everything they need to, but to create a lot of clarity. So I think that's also something you should think before sending out a survey and thinking about your action plans. Let's talk a little bit about the details. So now you have thought about, I want to send it out then, I want to have those visibility settings, I've communicated about, yeah, thresholds and everything. So now you think, okay, what do I want to ask? Or you have defined categories like, okay, those are categories you want to check in on a regular base. And I would like to walk you through how we design questions based on the feedback and recognition category, for example. And something a lot of people might think about those categories now. Okay, I want to know if people receive meaningful feedback. Good question, good scoring question. You can say on a scale of 1 to 10, I receive meaningful feedback. Great. But now you, for your action planning, think, okay, they don't receive meaningful feedback, but what do I do now? So I recommend to become more specific with questions, like really ask, where's this feedback coming from? Normally for managers or peers. So we have two questions, like one in the direction of the manager. So you ask, my manager provides positive and constructive feedback that helps me improve my performance and grow in my career, because that's what manager feedback should intend. And if this score is high, you know, okay, my managers are good in giving feedback, so I don't have to take action on that. And then you have another question, the feedback I receive from my peers as actionable and helps me improve. And again, when you see, okay, this score is maybe low, then I have to do more enablement around peer feedback or get more communicative about it or whatever. So I really recommend to break down questions like that, like think about from whom could feedback come from and how do I, can already design this question to take action in a very targeted and actionable and tangible way in the end. And then after every category, you might want to ask open-ended questions, like, are there any additional thoughts people have? And anything else is also maybe a typical question, so anything else on feedback and recognition. And again, there, like, depending on your tool, like AI tools can already then get a lot of comments, and I already think especially this qualitative feedback is overwhelming and hard to structure. So I also like to break up this a little bit and ask what is already going well in the category, because this can already show you like, hey, we've already made progress on that, or that's something people value what we do, and this is already working. So I don't have to think about that when I plan actions or want to redesign processes. And then we also always ask for every category, what can we improve? Because that normally gives you very tangible feedback on, hey, there's still a spot where we should look into, and what we can work on. So this always gives you better insights and also easier to structure, easier to summarize for you and the leadership team. So that about asking questions, and as I just said, be super specific. Don't ask two questions in one. That can also be very confusing. And ask specific open-ended questions. I think those are really a game changer instead of asking anything else. And in case you want to benchmark your data, which is possible with Leapsome, we recommend to stick close to our best practice questions, because those are the ones we collected benchmark data on. And also avoid frequent changes to survey questions so you can track trends over time. And here I also want to give you another insight on how to set up things, which is not about survey questions, but maybe about settings or thinking about what you already have. Because you might already have some data that is useful to leverage in your surveys. Thinking about, again, depending if you use a tool, so this might not be very useful for people who already use Leapsome or one of our competitors. You have data in the employee profiles, and I would really recommend to use them and make sure they are clean, and also think about, is there more data that I could add that could really help me to really have impactful actions and results. For example, understanding what your high performers value can be a game changer. So you can either add attributes to employee profiles, and if you then have the opportunity to filter for them in the survey module in your tool, in Leapsome you can do that. And we do that, and it's really impactful, but it's also already integrated a little bit. So because our reviews module and survey module, they kind of talk to each other. So you can already filter for, hey, what are the scores of our high performers? So if you really want to focus on retaining top talent, leveraging data like that can be very useful for your survey, and setting them up. And also maybe very obvious, but we use a lot of demographic data as well. And we also make sure this is very clean, because we have 2 locations. And it can be very helpful to say, okay, this location is asking for this, especially when you have questions around your offices. Just make sure the data you have already is very clean and set up to succeed when you set up your survey. And then we come to the moment, you have designed your questions, you have thought about those, this is in my employee profiles, this is stuff I can filter for now, but how do I go into action planning? We do action planning on 2 levels. I think I've already said this maybe a little bit. We always workshop results on a department level and company level. And also in the people team, but let's maybe focus on those 2 layers today. And when it comes to participants, in the department workshops participate the department leads, so the department head and the respective team leads, people enablement, and also the people partner. And the company workshop is then the senior leadership team, C-level, and also me normally, or C-level, just, depending on your company structure. For the department workshops, we have department-specific summaries of results and comments. Very luxurious situation that our Leapsome AI can do that. So that's very helpful. And for the company, we have the same, but on a company level. And also use a lot of the AI recommendations that we have. But you can also leverage ChatGPT very well with your results if you have a company internal ChatGPT or any other OpenAI tool you use for generating those summaries. And then we focus really on clear, tangible action plans on a department level, normally owned by managers. We try to support them as a people team, but normally the managers own the concrete action plans. And on a company level, there we are more where we support from the people end. But also a lot of them are owned by the leadership team. So let's get a little bit into the details. On a department level, we focus on 4 essential questions. So we send the department the summary. We recommend them to please engage with the results and Leapsome as well. Like filter, try out, like what can you see? And then we ask them what their main takeaway from the results is, which is always very insightful for us as well. Like what do managers look out for? What is the most important topic they want to focus on, and what is the second most important topic they want to focus on, and if there's a specific comment from their team that they would like to discuss. And that then already gives me a lot of insights to prepare the workshop, because I can then cluster themes and say like, hey, those might be themes we should take action on. I give you a little more insight on those workshop designs in a second. And then we focus really, as I said, that the action plans are tangible and, what I think is very important, doable on a department level. Because you might get distracted from comments that are more focused on a company level. On a department level, you won't, for example, solve salary bands. That's something you have to discuss on a company level. But what you can solve on a department level is, for example, recognition in the team. So there you could think about a concrete action plan. And that's something which is sometimes difficult, but manageable. And I would always like call them back to, okay, can you do this in the department? As like a good criteria is always, do we need approval to do this? No, then it's doable on a department level. Like, changing salary bands, you normally need a lot of approvals. Define an owner that feels accountable. Always I say you don't have to do it alone, but that someone feels responsible to get this action done. And have a clear timeline, so to really hold them accountable. And that then looks normally like this. So it's a Notion page. It might help you, so feel free to take screenshots, but I can also send you something like that afterwards. So I collect a lot of heat maps. We look into the qualitative feedback here, those 4 questions I mentioned, and here's then a little bit the workshop structure. So you see, it's not super fancy, but we made the experience that it is very impactful. So there's no fancy, colorful Miro board or something like that. It's really just a Notion page, and we talk about the results. I cluster some themes, and then we brainstorm together on what are actions we can take on this theme based on all the results we have just gained. And then I normally ask if there are other actions they would like to take and how P&C can support them. So this is one of our best practices on department level. and maybe very high level on, yeah, as I said, Leapsome AI does a lot of the heavy lifting here, which is very comfortable. And on a company level, we also focus on stuff, but on those questions like main takeaways, but that we already focus on a lot of AI recommended action plans. It's something our Leapsome AI does. As I said, I think you can also leverage ChatGPT for that very well when you put the qualitative feedback you received in there and ask like, hey, what could be action plans? But in our Leapsome AI, it's very comfortable. And we focus, as I said, on the categories that need the most attention. So we first really look on those categories and not on all 40 questions or something like that. Yeah, and that are also connected to them as stakeholders. We share the action plans back with the company so that they really see that we are working on the results. As I said in the beginning, building trust is before the survey, but I think also after the survey closes, so before the next one, really show that you work with them. We already have a clear goal on how much we want to improve our score. And yeah, we also sometimes like to include the questions of the category we focus on with the leadership team in the Pulse survey to really see the progress in between the engagement surveys. Those are normally just 1 or 2 questions max that we add to our Pulse surveys. So there is a lot of content now. I try to be also fast and give you a lot of insights. To summarize, give yourself time in all dimensions. Give yourself time to analyze, give yourself time in between surveys to really take action. Take this action and build trust with that. Like always show that you at least read the results, comment on them in all hands or whatever formats you have. Because if you don't, people might think you're not reading them and they are not answering again, so you don't receive feedback anymore. And also stay flexible, like adjust timing, questions, content to your current needs and company needs. And I think then surveys can become really impactful instead of just sending them based on a schedule. Like really look into, does it really make sense today or should I send it 5 days later? That's normally, it doesn't break a leg, to change it slightly. So I would say those are my 3 must-haves, and all the other things I told you today are maybe then the add-ons you can build over time. And now I hope some of you still have time for a Q&A.
Thanks, Marie. That was awesome. I have questions, but I want to get to our attendees first. Corinne asked, how can you tell if you are getting survey fatigue and what participation rate would you consider to be strong?
Yeah. So I think you've already answered it a little bit, like participation rate going down is one of the first, things I would say, okay, we maybe have reached survey fatigue. Also the detail level of the comments, like if people don't comment at all anymore, they might be survey fatigue, they just click through the scores. Yeah. And participation rate, I mean, we sell the product, so ours might not be the benchmark. So I would have to ask CS what the typical benchmark is. We normally reach for 80%, which is quite high. And I think our customers normally reach for something between 60 and 70. So 80 is very ambitious. Yeah.
And then actually, wait, I lost it. William had a follow-up question. If there were any other tips for conducting surveys with a smaller sample size, for example, if you only have 50 employees, what 60% of that could look like.
So could you repeat the question? I also tried to find it.
Do you have any tips for conducting surveys that maybe have smaller employee populations, so that the data provides some valid insights, since a percentage is obviously going to be a smaller number of employees since it is such a small company?
Yeah. That's a difficult one for me. So I would say maybe consider different formats also of collecting feedback. I would ask myself if surveys for such a small team is then the right format, to be very honest. Like an anonymous survey can be very insightful, but also workshops or retros like more or less continue, where we really sit down together in a team, could be something which is even more insightful with such a small team. Because as you said, then 60% is, how much is 60% of 15%? 15 people team. And then you might still have the trust to really sit down together. Yeah, that would be my recommendation, to really think about the format, if the format is right, or if you want to send it maybe also more often, and with rotating questions and not like 2 a year, but then maybe 1 a quarter, and say we do action planning on surveys based twice a year, and be vocal about that with the team. Like, don't expect action every time you receive a survey, but maybe every third time. Because then always someone else might participate, and then you get feedback from at least everyone once in those 3 surveys you collected. Something like that. Yeah.
Bella asked the question. Bella, if you're online, I just want clarification, because she said we're doing 6 monthly surveys. So I'm interpreting that you're doing 6 surveys per month, which seems like a large number. How do you suggest keeping it alive so we're not always talking about survey results? Bella, are you here with us to clarify?
Sorry, on that it was twice a year, so once every 6
Okay.
months.
Okay. So not 6 monthly surveys, a survey every 6 months, Marie. How do you keep it alive when you're not always talking about survey results? Thank you for clarifying, Bella.
Mm. Mm. And you're not always talking about survey results. What do you actually mean with not always? Do you mean the whole time in between? Or
So what I mean is, if once we've kind of shared all the engagement survey results back to the business and we've made our commitments, like, how would you suggest kind of like keeping the spark alive so that people know that we're still thinking about it, that they're still relevant, even though you may not come to talk about that for another 6 months in terms of kind of like progress and then relaunching the next survey?
So I check in, for example, with department leads every 6 to 8 weeks, very short, 15 minutes, like, how are your action plans going? And then celebrate results with the teams. And on a company level, we have the action plans visible in our tool, and that people can track the progress. And we also like to, as I said, include, I don't know if you have pulse surveys, but we like to include the scores or the questions we want to improve the score on in the pulse survey. So that might also show like, hey, they still take care of it and track the progress around this specific topic. And maybe find opportunities in formats like all hands and so on to update the team, or on an async level. Yeah, how action plans or how the actions you take are going. And also be honest, if you drop an action, that can also happen, because in 6 months time also your company priorities can change, and it might not make sense anymore to follow up on something. We've also seen that in the past.
Marie, and in the interest of time, we're going to take 2 more questions. And then if you want to enter any other questions in chat, I'll capture it and make sure to pass it along to Marie. First up, Laura Palumbo asks, do you find that implementing a net promoter score question is a worthwhile metric to measure?
The question is just, do you mean with net promoter score, like if people would recommend working at your company, or the typical 2 years time question, like, do you still see yourself working at XYZ in 2 years time?
Yeah, that's exactly it. We have a question. How likely are you to recommend Creative X, the name of our company, as a place to work? That's the way we frame the question. But people answer it so differently, and their interpretation is so varied. Some people think it's like a blind endorsement, like a Yelp review, and others are like, if it's the right person who I think would thrive here, then yes, of course I would recommend them. And I think it's kind of, as we ask people how they interpret it, feels like it's hard to rely on that info, but we know it's an industry standard question and something interesting to track. And I'm just curious if you've ever worked with that metric before. And
yeah, we work with that metric and we have it integrated. I would recommend to think about a description of the question, which is sometimes possible in tools. Like, what do you mean with it? Do you mean people to work here, or recommend our product? So make it clear it's about more employer branding, so that people want to work here. And maybe also experiment with other questions, like something around would you reapply or something like that? Because that maybe goes more in the direction, yes, I would reapply. I still like it here. And if you reapply, you might also recommend it to other employees. But I would first go with a detailed description of what you mean with the question, or what is the intention behind asking it.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thanks, Marie. WB asks, what survey design tactics have you found most effective for maximizing data quality while also minimizing rater fatigue? He gave some examples like, is format important, length, rating skill, anonymity, etc. Are there any key design tactics that you think drive the best results?
I would say first, it's not really about the design tactics, it's about the communication around it. Really communicate what is happening with the results. When it then comes to the design with the question format, as I said, keep it specific and like, sure, how do you say? That it doesn't feel too long. Like you've seen, we have a lot of survey question categories, but no categories longer than 4 questions. So we really ask 4 specific questions on feedback and recognition, but then you ask 4 questions on DEI, so it doesn't feel too long. And with that, I've made the best experience, because you just have 30 questions and a bunch in a row, and you don't know, okay, what are you focusing on now? I don't know. And we also have a short description of each survey question category, which then makes it very short while. What do you say in English? Like, yeah, it doesn't feel so long. And as I said, with smaller teams, I would recommend experimenting with rotating questions and sending surveys more often, and just say, we look into the results in Q2 and Q4, but we send the surveys, running every 4 weeks or something like that, and you still have a big catalog of questions.
One last question from Crystal, and I think it's actually a great one to end on, because Leapsome is part of the answer of this as well. She asked, how do you aggregate the data from the surveys, and is there a metric tool that you use to measure impact?
It's Leapsome. So we do it all in our own tool. I can only recommend to take a look at it. You have a lot of different views. You have a heat map view, you have a list view. You can really, Leapsome also calculates which questions had the most impact on the overall scoring in the survey, which I think is also very useful, because you can see, okay, those are the top 5 questions that had the most impact on the overall scoring. So yeah, I recommend Leapsome. That's how we
Thanks, Marie. And one thing I'd like to add, less so on the engagement survey side and more on the performance management side, one of the things that I think is such a useful and unique tool that Leapsome offers within the platform is the fact that when there is opportunity for growth or opportunity to engage, you also have the solutions to provide to the employee. So it's not just like, oh, this is what you need to do, now go find where to do it. You're kind of giving the opportunity and then the solution to kind of close that gap. That is the opportunity. Anyway, Marie, this was so amazing. You packed so many incredible insights into a short amount of time. Thank you so much. We will certainly make sure to make connections between you and the Troop community. Jillian, I see your question. We'll get back to you in follow-up. And any other questions, just email us at hello@troophr.com, and we will make sure to connect you with the Leapsome team. You'll also receive follow-up from us this afternoon with details on how to connect with them. Thank you, everyone. Great to see you, Leapsome. Thank you for the incredible work you do. Take care, everyone. Bye.
Thank you.